Hey, welcome to week 2 of our series that we're calling Stuck. And I'm going to start out by kind of sharing a story of something that happened to me when I was just out of college. It was kind of my first year of working right before I got married. I actually referenced this last week at Ripple Effect, but it was a day where I was, about a month away from getting married, kind of toward the end of the school year, or I was a teacher, and I was really hoping to get a job down here in Wilmington where I knew that my wife and I were going to be moving. And I was up for 2 different teaching jobs here in Wilmington, and I hadn't heard back from them for a long time. So I decided that that was the day during one of my free periods I was going to call and find out if I got either of the jobs. Unfortunately, I talked to both of the schools and found out that they had hired people that were already working at the school and they just moved them into a new position. So I was kind of frustrated, kind of bummed about that. But hey, I'm going to be getting married soon, which is really exciting. So I tried to kind of make it through the end of the day and kind of press on. Well, at the end of the day, I was driving home and I was trying to get home really quick because I was supposed to be hanging out with my family. And then we're going to go right back to the school, which is where I went to church as well, and for something going on at church. So I was hurrying home. I was stuck in traffic. And wouldn't you know it, out of nowhere, I'm driving along. Someone turns in front of me and I slam right into their car. I ended up wrecking my car. It was not one of those things where it was just kind of like a little dent. No, like I had to send my car, it had to get towed in, had to get taken away and to get totally worked on. And I was frustrated. I was angry I didn't get the jobs. I was angry I wasn't married yet. I had to wait, a couple more weeks. And I was ticked about my car because I wasn't making a ton of money and I wasn't gonna have the money to really take care of it. And it set me off for the rest of that day in a terrible mood. I just decided I was not going to do anything fun with my family. I was not going to go back to the church. I just was going to not have a good attitude. And it set me off on a period of a couple of days of just really being frustrated, being down, almost like being depressed because I was frustrated by my situation. And I felt like I didn't do anything to deserve it. Has this ever happened to you? Like you've woken up one day and just in a bad mood and you just kind of went through the whole day frustrated and didn't really know how to get out of it. Maybe you kind of felt like you were stuck in an emotional state that you didn't know how to get out of. You know what I'm talking about. Like maybe one bad thing happens in the second period and it just ruins the rest of your day at school. Or you get in an argument with your mom and you find out like hours later you're still ticked with her for no reason. Or you wake up feeling like you hate everything for no reason, and you just can't shake that feeling of frustration or depression or anger or just a bad mood. It's not a great feeling for you. I know what it's like to feel like that, and it's not a great feeling to be in that. But the truth is, it's also not a great feeling for the people around you. Like when you get stuck in a negative place emotionally, it drains the whole room, it drains everyone around you. We've all felt like this before, but we deal with it differently. We all deal with kind of these frustrations or bad moods differently. Some of you, if you're like me, I just let it overflow. I just let the bad mood overflow. I want to make sure everyone around me knows I'm in a bad mood and feels the effect of it. In fact, that Friday that I got in that car wreck and I didn't get the jobs that I wanted, I ruined the rest of the day and really the rest of the weekend for my family. I was living at home at the time and everybody else in my family knew I was mad, knew I was upset because I wanted to make sure they knew that. I let my frustration kind of overflow out of me. Or maybe you're like people who, instead of letting it overflow, you bottle it up. You keep those feelings inside and try to make sure that nobody really knows what's going on. And the truth is, eventually, that stuff doesn't just overflow, it explodes out of you. Like those emotions eventually need to go somewhere and be expressed. Here's what you need to know. Feeling stuck in an emotional state that you can't get out of, or you don't feel like you can't get out of, that is not a new thing. It's not an abnormal thing. It's not a new condition. In fact, people for hundreds and thousands, since the creation of human beings, have been feeling that. There's an actual old scripture I want to talk about. It was written by, it's from the Song of Solomon, or it's from Ecclesiastes actually, written by King Solomon, who was David's son, and who many people regard as the wisest man in the world. And he has a couple of wisdom literature things that he wrote that are collected in the Bible. Proverbs is one of them. Song of Solomon is another one. And this is one from the book of Ecclesiastes. And it's a pretty well-known set of scripture verses and I'm going to go ahead and read to you. He wrote this. He says that there's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. So, what does this scripture mean exactly? Here's what I think Solomon's talking about. He said at the beginning, at the very beginning of this passage of scripture, that there is a time for everything. And it's important to know when one time has ended and another time is starting. And when it comes to our feelings, one might say there's a time to be miserable and there's a time to move on. There is a time to be sad and there's a time to celebrate. There's a time to be down, and there's a time to pick yourself back up. And in other words, there is a time for the emotions that we're feeling. There's a time for everything. It's okay to sometimes feel down, to feel frustrated, to be in a bad mood. We aren't being asked to live happy lives all the time. That is impossible. And it's not real. It's not normal. And it's not good to not let ourselves feel down when something bad happens. It's okay to be mad when someone hurts us. It's perfectly normal to be sad when a friend moves away. There's a time for that, and it's normal. But there's also a time when we have to get unstuck from our feelings as well. In fact, this verse tells us there's a time to weep and a time to laugh. That means that our lives will have both. One feeling one way one day does not determine how you're always going to feel. And at some point soon, it'll be time to feel something else. In other words, a bad day doesn't equal a bad life. And the healthiest thing we can do when we feel stuck in a bad emotion is to remember that there's a time for everything. And this time won't last. Think of it this way. This isn't as forever as it feels. The emotion that you're feeling today is not as forever as it feels. And I know what it's like to be in those situations where you're feeling down, you're feeling in a bad mood, and you feel like it's going to be like that forever. But you have to remember that it's not as forever as it feels. And it's a big deal for you in this point in your lives because you're making decisions. You are making lifelong decisions, long term decisions based on short term emotions. As a high schooler, often you let your emotions dictate the long-term decisions that you're making, and that's kind of a dangerous place to be. You're deciding things like whether or not to quit a sport or activity, whether or not to try in school, whether or not to drink or experiment with a certain type of drug, whether or not to fight with your parents, whether or not to treat your bodies well or poorly, whether or not to give up on the whole God thing. So you're making decisions as a high schooler that it's really important to not let your current emotions that aren't going to be forever dictate how you make that decision. These are decisions with long term effects, yet we're basing them on feelings that may change. In other words, our short term mood can drag our behavior down with it. But here's the reality: our mood is not the boss of us. We can pay attention, and you should pay attention to your emotions, but your emotions do not need to run your life. Look, I know that bad moods never feel temporary. In fact, they may make you feel like things are never going to change and they're going to stay like that forever. And when you see them in that way, it will help you. When you see that your emotions are not going to be forever, it'll help you handle them in a healthy way. And eventually it'll help you get unstuck. So here's how I want you to apply this. And you're going to be going to your small groups and talk about this in a little bit more in depth in a couple of minutes. But I'm going to give you something that could possibly be a game changer for you when it comes to how to work through your emotions. Lots of people have learned this from experience. Just like your mood can drag down your behavior, the reverse is true as well. That your behavior has a potential to change your mood. Sometimes what you choose to do can affect your mood. Just like your mood can change your behaviors have the potential to change your mood. You can actually behave your way into feeling differently. And here are some examples of that. First of all, you need to remind yourself that how you feel isn't forever. It's not as forever as it feels. It doesn't mean it's not going to feel like forever right now. It just means that you have to know that the way that you're feeling right now is just not how it's always going to feel. You also need to know that you have more power than you think. You are not a victim of your emotions. You're in control. You don't have to your emotions do not have to dictate your behavior. They're a part of you, but they're not all of you. The other thing you can do is you need to focus on the good. That's a behavioral shift that can really change your mood when you focus on the good. See, life is not 100% one thing and 0% another. Your life is not 100% good and 0% bad ever. And the reverse is also true. Your life is never 100% as bad as you think it is. Like, even on days where you feel like everything is going well and you couldn't be happier, there are definitely things that are around to be frustrated about. But the opposite is also true. In days when you're frustrated, more often than not, you're probably able to get a hot shower. You probably haven't gone without a meal. You just found a bag of Skittles in a random drawer. See, the blessings pile up when you stop and think that your life isn't you and you focus on the good and realize that there are so many things to be thankful for instead of the mood that you're feeling currently. And the last thing is just to get outside of yourself. Sometimes it just really helps for you to have a conversation with somebody to realize that the mood that you're feeling isn't forever. It's not going to last forever. And you need to know this, you do not need to be afraid to ask for help. Sometimes you can be stuck in a pattern of thinking or in a behavior or an emotion that you simply cannot get out of on your own. And it's going to take talking to someone who trust and getting some help to be able to move beyond the current emotional state that you're in. Sometimes you just need to get outside of yourself and go talk to other people. And you've got small group leaders and people in your life that are there to help you with that. But the bottom line is this, that your bad mood, sometimes it feels like we're stuck and we can't get out of it. But you need to remember that the way that you feel is not as forever as it feels.